As always, we sing that song in loving remembrance of Mary Lee Rickard. That was her favorite hymn, and I can't sing it without remembering Stephen Moore's grandmama, Mary Lee. We give thanks for all of the people that have come before in the life of this church, all that we can rest assured are with the Lord now and from time to time may look in on our worship services. I found this thing on eBay and I couldn't resist it. It touched me and it moved me. It's something that most Protestant churches don't have around them. I've never seen one in a Protestant church before. It is a crucifix, Christ upon the cross. During the Reformation, one of the things that the Protestant church did, and later the Puritans, they were very concerned about any kind of imagery in the church. In fact, Cromwell and his men in the 300 years ago, 250, in England, went through the villages and broke out the ancient stained glass windows in the churches. And you can go into a church over there now and you can see a statue of Simon Peter without his head, and the Virgin Mary with just the lower part of her still hanging to the wall, and the statues of our Lord were broken apart and taken down, and many of the churches have tried to restore those now because we're not so afraid of works of art depicting our Lord as we used to be as Protestants. And I must tell you that I was looking at this thing the other day when it finally came in the mail, and first of all, I was particularly interested in it because I believe the face on this was modeled after the face on the Shroud of Turin. And I've long had an interest in the Shroud of Turin and am convinced that it is authentic. I believe that the scientific evidence points to the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin. It's something a lot of people fight very hard, especially some members of the scientific community, but scientists have been working on the shroud since 1978 to try to determine its authenticity, and many scientists have said that they believe that it is the real thing. This is very carefully carved, and there's something about it that I find especially moving, and I will tell you about that at the end of the sermon today. I'll use it now to tell you that when our Lord carried the cross to Calvary, he did not carry the whole cross as it will be carried into the front of our sanctuary later. The upright piece was already at Calvary. Nobody could have lifted the whole thing. The criminal, and that's what Jesus was listed as, a criminal, he has the crime written right above him. They would put thief, murderer, whatever that happened to be, above the criminal on the cross, indicating their crime. This cross, as many that you will see that crucifixes, has I-N-R-I, and those letters stand for the message that was on the cross. His crime was, and they did put this here sarcastically, his crime was being king of the Jews. The Roman authorities thought it would be quite humorous to put that sign over a man who was dying and bleeding on a cross. But anyway, he carried only the crossbeam up the hill of Calvary, through part of the town, through the gate and up the hill. And I'll tell you later why they had him carry any part of the cross and why the crucifixion victim always carried part of the cross. I'm fascinated by the events of Holy Week. I'm fascinated because of the effort that God and our Lord had to make in timing the events of Holy Week. Because if you look at the crucifixion, as horrible and difficult as it is for us to stare at it carefully, it is a work of absolute perfection. Everything during that week worked as it had to work. The entrance of our Lord into Jerusalem on that donkey, followed by an even more audacious act, which was the cleansing of the temple, guaranteed that people would get angry at him for simply declaring who he was. Now, if somebody else had declared themselves to be the Messiah, it might have gone over better with the authorities, with the religious authorities. We think of Jesus, the old line is that Jesus was crucified by the Jews. Actually, he wasn't. He was crucified by the Roman soldiers. And the only Jews who had anything against him were the religious authorities, not the Jewish people. I need not remind you, Jesus was Jewish. So was Peter. So was Paul. So were all of the other people who followed our Lord. So was Mary Magdalene, who went to the tomb. This story comes out of the Jewish people. And all of those throngs of people that followed him that day, they were all Jewish people. So this is a thoroughly Jewish story that is universally true for all people. So get it out of our heads that the Jewish people crucified our Lord. The religious authorities did then. And my surmise is that if he came back today, it would be us good church people who would be in on the crucifixion. Because the problem is that he loved everybody. And the thing he asked about other people in deciding the great moral issues of his day, and the thing we have to decide in the great moral issues of our day, the question we have to ask is, what does this person need? What does this person need, you see? What? We have an anthem? Yes? No, I know we have an anthem. Yeah. And the sermon is necessarily brief, and we're going to go from here to lunch, and we do have an anthem. But what did people need? It was because Jesus, it was this guy who loved everybody, who was claiming messiahship, that it was so difficult for people to take. The one who loved the whole world around him. When it came time for the crucifixion, some things had to happen. First of all, he had to be on the cross Friday at noon. He had to be dead by 3 o'clock. There had to be just enough time to get him off the cross and to the tomb just before sundown. And it could not be a long time before sundown. It had to be so close to sundown that the women could not finish preparing the body, because they were going to have to come back on Easter Sunday morning. And all of this timing had to work. And this is where we see God working in this event to create the perfect witness to God's love for the world. The thing that so moved me about this cross is that even as Jesus is stretched out upon it, with his hands nailed to the tree, he has both hands in the symbol of a blessing. Even as he dies, he blesses our world and us. May his name be praised.